All right, let's wrap all this stuff up. I'll admit, I originally envisioned this as 1 hour and 15-minute lecture, but there's no way this is going to fit into one. But it's still one lesson, right? So lesson 3 on philosophical tools, continuing our unit on theory and method, which will continue after this one too. Next lesson, we'll cover what is religion and get a little less abstract, a little less philosophical, but still, applying the phenomenological method to this notion or this word religion. But for now, let's try and wrap all this up, pull all these different strands together. All of them, of course, are linked together by circles and zeros. In fact, we began this 6-part lesson with meditation, the Enso Zen Buddhist meditation from the Japanese Zen tradition, which is typically meditation on a circle, usually by drawing a circle with a paintbrush, a single circle, one time, one attempt. But there are lots of different ways to practice this. Everybody has their own style, and for me personally, I tend to just imagine that circle in my head and just draw that circle over and over again as a meditation, trying to line up my breath, my in-breath with my out-breath. The circle, circle, just this circle of life that's sort of circling each moment of time, each passing of the future into the present now, and then it becomes the past again, right? The sort of future becoming now, where I can do something about it, and then becoming past, where I can't do anything about it again. As a practice of mindfulness to ground oneself in the present moment, but also, as the Buddhist monk pointed out in that video I asked you to watch, it's also a way of clearing intellectual divisions that are created by the mind, which are signifiers, right? Signifiers are intellectual divisions that are created by the mind to divide reality into certain categories, which are nothing other than our creations. And because they're our creations, then we might investigate or question whether we want to continue or perpetuate those same divisions of reality in the way that, in our society, white men for centuries have been defining them, or whether we want to call those into question and rethink them in light of new understandings of science and new understandings of evolution, new realities, and particularly the realities that we've all become so intimately familiar with in 2020. As we covered in the next unit, zero is a signifier. I gave you a definition of zero. Zero is a signifier. Signifiers are signs that point, like the Buddha's pointing finger, right? They point at something else. And we must not get confused between the finger, which is signifying, and that which it is signifying. So if the Buddha is pointing at the moon, he doesn't want you to stare at his finger all day, but you have to look at his finger in order to see that at which it's pointing. But you also have to let go of it, right? Move away from the sign, move away from the signifier, erase the signifier, so to speak, so that the nothing that it signifies can be seen without drawing attention to the something, without becoming a something. So zero is a signifier that signifies the no-thingness by drawing a circle around nothing, thereby giving nothing a place to be. Of course, nothing already was in that place, but I've called out that nothing and I've enabled it to exist by standing, insofar as it stands out from everything outside of the circle, right? Then I gave you a definition of a circle. A circle is an infinite series of dimensionless points equidistant from a single dimensionless point. Why dimensionless? Well, for various reasons, but one is just mathematics, right? We calculate the circumference of a circle using pi, and pi is an irrational number, which means that a circle is something that can only truly exist as a circle qua circle, as an intellectual entity, can only exist in the mind, in this sort of fourth dimension without any sort of adherence in the other three, since if it exists in the 3 dimensions, then it would have space, it would have, length, width, depth, all those sort of dimensions, and then it would no longer be a circle. It would be something other than a circle, right? Because then would you say, well, the circle is the inside of this line or the outside of the line, or do we measure, right? So a circle is an infinite series of dimensionless points equidistant from a single dimensionless point. And 0 is one of those circles, and 0, in its circling nothing, it divides nothing into 2, right? This nothing that was there is then divided into nothing, thereby causing nothing to exist. It's a creation of something from nothing. How can that be possible? Well, because this something that is created is not a real thing. It's not made of matter or even of energy, but instead it is just an intellectual division. Well, maybe we could say it's made of energy. It's concepts, right? It's made by the mind. They're intellectual divisions that are created by the mind, right? And so 0 exists, or circles exist as intellectual entities, as intellectual concepts within the mind. Then we turn to logic and Aristotelian, Aristotle's first rules of logic, right? The law of identity. Let A be A. Don't use words in lots of different ways, right? Red could mean anger. Red could mean danger. Red could mean all these other things. Red could mean pigment, right? Or we could say that this cloth is red because when we look at it, red light bounces off of it, right? But really what we're talking about is the light that is red, not the pigment, which absorbs every color other than red. So we have to be careful and meticulous in our terms. Remember that phenomenological method? When I first gave you the phenomenological method, I said the fundamental problem and benefit of the phenomenological method is that sometimes your neighbor doesn't always speak clearly. Your neighbor doesn't always describe reality as carefully and meticulously as one might hope. So you have to bring a certain hermeneutics of suspicion, like, do I trust everything that this person is saying? But that's often not because the person is lying to you. It's most often because they are not very careful and meticulous in their use of words, right? They don't follow the rules of logic, the rules of identity. They get confused. They don't even think about the fact that is has a various meanings, right? It can describe qualities or formal or forms or functions or activities. So let your words mean what they mean, and don't try to get out of a logical argument by changing the meaning of the words. In other words, you let your A always be A, and A should never mean the opposite of what it means. A means what it means, right? So another circle that divides reality into A and not A. Ontology. Then we had a unit on ontology. What does it mean to be? And we thought about the various ways that things can be, right? So the various ways that we use the word is. So we said, I gave you lots of different sentences, such as this is a cup, right? This is a cup. Why? Because it has the form of a cup. That could be one answer, right? In the same way that Darth Vader is Luke's father, because he has the form, because he ejaculated into his mother, and then became Luke's and Leia's father, right? So that's one way to identify form. That's one way to use the word is through various forms. So these ideas, and then that gives a lot of weight to these intellectual ideas or forms that we've created with our mind, then take on a particular reality that some people think is even more real than the physical things. Another way to think about it is through things can exist through words, through knowledge, through descriptions, through signifiers, right? So we can say, I use the example of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, right? So Stravinsky's Rite of Spring exists as an idea or as a form in Stravinsky's mind, although not so much anymore since he's dead. But it can exist as signifiers on a page, right? So that's one way for it to exist. Now, it's not existing as music. It's not existing as Stravinsky conceived of it or gave birth to it in his mind. But nevertheless, it's a way for it to exist. It's one of the many ways for it to exist, which is quite dramatically different than, right? Another way in Plato's Seventh Letter, he said that a circle can exist as an idea in our mind, or it can exist as a definition, such as an infinite series of dimensionless points equidistant from a singular point. Now, this we could say is a very good definition of circle. Thank you very much. But it also is not a circle, right? It's a description, it's a definition. In the same way that this is this is Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, right? But it's also not Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, because it's just signifying Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. It's a way for it to be, but a way for it to be not music. Then we could have sensible things, right? We could have this actual cup. Now we could say, well, it's not a cup because it's just atoms and electrons. You know, it's just atoms of molecules arranged in a particular fashion, and we then give it the word cup. But really, the word cup is supposed to signify its function, its ability to be a cup here in the world through its way of being in relation to, you know, my needs to have a cup. So sensible things exist in forms of matter and energy, things that we can sense, right? Sense with our ears, eyes. We'll come back to this later. But things can also exist as images or shadows, perhaps, you know, as ones and zeros on a Spotify server, or ones and zeros in a, you know, in a JPEG file prior to its being decoded by a codec. Yeah, so much more we could say on that, and we will come back to this, particularly when we get to Plato's allegory in the cave in a few lessons. Then we turn again to sort of think about mutually constitutive correlates and the fact that all signifiers, not just zero, right? I talked about zero as one particular signifier, and it's a unique signifier because it's signifying nothing and thereby turning that nothing into a something. But nevertheless, all signifiers do the same thing, right? That's the function of a signifier, is to divide reality into certain intellectual divisions that are created by our minds in order to communicate something or to describe or to communicate to others some notion of reality. But these are intellectual divisions created by our mind. We must not think that the zero is nothing. The zero is not nothing, right? The zero is a something that is used to signify nothing, right? But if we want, as Brahmagupta said, if we really want to signify nothing, then the best way to do that would be to draw a circle around nothing and then erase that circle so that we are left with the nothing, right? Because nothing is more nothing than zero, right? Nothing is more nothing than zero, which is signifying nothing. It's a null set, right? But the null set, the only thing more nothing than a null set would be not a null set, right? No set at all. So signifiers are intellectual divisions created by the mind that divide reality into dualistic categories. These dualistic categories are always mutually constitutive correlates, right? A and not A. Parent, child. Sibling, sibling. A, not A. Red, not red. Whatever thing you want to say, right? So any signifier naturally as an epistemic, philosophical, logical reality, all signifiers divide reality into two. And those intellectual divisions are created by the mind. Why does that matter? Well, one reason is, coming back to Brahmagupta, first of all, if we have to remember that these signifiers can take on a certain weight or certain ontology themselves, and these can often be overpowering or dominating within our reality, particularly when those categories get put into laws or statutes or rules governing, you know, things like ethics or behavior or justice. But also, just intellectually, maybe if we go back to the Enso meditation, remember that at every moment, when I practice the Enso meditation, as I said, I sort of draw in my mind, in my mind's eye, I just draw a circle and draw a circle and draw a circle. And each one reminds me that every circle is an intellectual division that divides up reality into categories that are created by my mind, that are not real. And because of that, it means that I have the power to create them otherwise, or to recreate these categories, to think about reality in a new way, right? To find other ways to divide up reality if I want to divide it at all. And by linking this to the breath, right? Each circle corresponding with a new breath. Is a way of reminding me that with every circle, is a way of reminding me that every breath presents a new opportunity to redraw the intellectual categories, the intellectual divisions that divide our world, that divide me from you, that divide us from them, that divide reality into various dualistic categories. And every breath represents a new way to think differently, a new opportunity to recreate the world, right? To start over, to erase, as Brahmagupta had said, to erase those signifiers as a way of remembering that we're not trying to signify, that the signifiers are less real than that which they signify, right? Like the Buddha's pointing finger. And so we want to erase those signifiers in order to draw attention to that which they signify. And we want to remember that these signifiers are just things that our minds have created, have made up. They're things that people before us have created or made up. But every moment presents a new opportunity to let go of those categories and divisions from the past, or to hold on to them, right? Some categories are good, but to think about those categories, to be mindful of those categories and consciously make a decision, right, within my power, my ethical power to make decisions. We'll talk about that word, to decide or to make finite, to make a cut between this and that, to decide how we want to divide up reality. Do we want to divide it in the same categories that have been passed down to us before, or do we want to take the opportunity to erase those signifiers and then to begin to redraw or redivide or recreate reality, not physical reality, right, but that intellectual reality, that reality at the level of ideas and knowledge? Do we want to recreate how we divide up this sensible world of human subjects and non-human subjects? So in other words, with every breath then presents a new opportunity to erase what has gone before. With every breath and every circle, right, with every in-breath and every out-breath, with every cycle of breathing, with every cycle of thinking, with every cycle of a new day or a new lesson or a new opportunity, whatever it is, with every breath we have an opportunity to think differently, to recreate those categories and to think in a new way about how we stand in relation to others, right? How do I exist or stand out or stand in relation with my neighbor, with my ecology, with my surroundings, with the natural world, with everything else that exists as part of this universe? You know, that's a lot of heavy stuff, and probably some of it stuck and some of it didn't, and that's just, how it goes. And the fault remains with me, I think, for anything that I didn't make clear. But thank you very much for paying attention and for focusing and staying with me through this lengthy lesson on philosophical tools. And yeah, thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Namaste.